The humid Dallas air, thick with the scent of jasmine and possibility, shimmered under the May twilight of 1998. Sarah Jenkins, 17, a senior at Richardson High, felt it in her bones, a thrilling anticipation that pulsed through the city's veins. Tonight was prom, the capstone of her adolescence, a shimmering bridge to a future she'd meticulously planned. Journalism at the University of Texas at Austin, a life of telling stories. Sarah was a force of nature, a bright supernova in her suburban orbit. With a quick wit and an infectious laugh, she navigated the labyrinthine halls of high school with an easy grace. Her best friend, Chloe, an inseparable fixture since kindergarten, was her sounding board and co-conspirator in all things teenage. Her boyfriend, Mark, the star quarterback, was dependable, if a little predictable. But Mark was safe, and right now, safe felt good. Her home, a comfortable two-story brick house in a leafy Plano neighborhood, was a sanctuary. David, her father, a pragmatic architect, adored her with a quiet intensity, his eyes crinkling at her every pronouncement. Emily, her mother, a vibrant elementary school teacher, was Sarah's confidant, a shared bond over late-night talks and the latest fashion magazines. And then there was Matt, her younger brother, 10 years old, who looked up to her with hero worship, a fact Sarah both exploited and secretly cherished. The prom dress, a delicate pale blue silk slip gown, hung like a promise in her closet. It shimmered with tiny sequins, catching the afternoon light. It was perfect. Emily had helped her choose it, a rare moment of maternal approval that Sarah savored. The corsage, white roses and baby's breath, waited in the refrigerator, a fragrant punctuation mark on the evening's beginning. The evening unfolded like a dream. Limousine rides, the nervous excitement, the flashing cameras in the grand ballroom of the Omni Dallas Hotel. The air thrummed with the latest pop hits, Spice Girls, Mariah Carey, Hanson, a soundtrack to their fleeting youth. Sarah, radiant, danced with Mark, laughed with Chloe, and felt the bittersweet pang of knowing this chapter was closing. It was perfect. Everything she had imagined. Around midnight, as the DJ spun the last slow song, the crowd began to thin, dispersing into the warm Dallas night. The after-party buzz was already circulating, a sprawling house party in a secluded cul-de-sac in Frisco, hosted by a senior whose parents were out of town. It was the place to be. Sarah and Mark planned to go with Chloe and her date, Jake. They'd already discussed it with Emily, promising to be home by 3 a.m., a generous extension of her usual curfew, given the special occasion. The journey to Frisco was a blur of giddy conversation and shared excitement. The house was already packed, pulsating with music and the murmur of 100 young voices. Kids spilled out onto the lawn, laughing, talking, celebrating their freedom. Sarah, feeling light and invincible, drifted through the crowd, Mark's hand a steady presence at her back. Around 2 a.m., the night took a subtle, almost imperceptible turn. Mark, ever the responsible one, suggested they head out, promising to drop Chloe and Jake off first. But Sarah, fueled by the music and the magic of the night, wasn't ready to leave. She spotted an old friend from middle school, Kevin Miller, across the room. Kevin, always a bit of a rebel, had a mischievous glint in his eye. He offered to drive her home later, promising a quicker, more direct route that bypassed the drop-offs. He had a beat-up Ford Ranger pickup truck, notorious for its speed. It felt like an adventure, a spontaneous deviation from the plan, a small, thrilling rebellion. "I'll catch a ride with Kevin," Sarah told Mark, a quick kiss on his cheek. "He lives closer to our neighborhood. You guys go ahead, I'll text you when I'm home." Texting in 1998 meant a very new, very clunky Nokia or Motorola, and often only worked within specific networks, but the sentiment was clear. Mark, slightly annoyed but used to Sarah's impulsive streak, agreed. "Don't be too late," he warned, a faint worry clouding his features. "Call me." Chloe waved goodbye, a little tipsy, already halfway to the door with Jake. Sarah vanished into the crowd with Kevin. That was the last confirmed sighting of Sarah Jenkins. The first alarm bell rang subtly, a gentle thrum beneath Emily's consciousness. 3 a.m. came and went, then 3:30. Emily's maternal radar, usually finely tuned, began to ping with a low-level anxiety. By 4 a.m., a cold knot of fear had begun to form in her stomach. Sarah was meticulous about keeping her word, especially with curfews. David, roused by Emily's restless pacing, called Mark. Mark, already home, was surprised Sarah hadn't returned. He hadn't heard from Kevin either. He promised to call around. The frantic calls began. Chloe, still groggy, remembered Sarah leaving with Kevin. She gave them Kevin's last name and a vague address. Emily and David tried Kevin's house. His parents, equally bewildered, hadn't seen Kevin since the party either. A sickening dread began to seep into the Jenkins home. At 7 a.m., with the sun already blazing a relentless Texas heat, Emily and David walked into the Plano Police Department. The young officer behind the desk listened patiently, but with an air of practiced detachment. Teenagers after prom, he mused, a faint hint of a smile playing on his lips. They often get carried away, probably crashed at a friend's house. She'll show up. They filled out a missing persons report, a sterile document that felt utterly inadequate to capture the terrifying void in their lives. The officer advised them to wait 24 hours. Most runaways return within a day. Runaway, the word hit Emily like a physical blow. Sarah planning UT Austin journalism, her whole future laid out. Never. The 24-hour mark passed, then 48. Sarah did not return. The police, no longer able to dismiss it as a simple runaway, launched a more formal investigation. Detectives showed up at the Jenkins home, their faces grim, their questions sharp and probing. They interviewed Mark again, Chloe, Jake, other students who had been at the prom and the after-party. Everyone confirmed Sarah had left with Kevin Miller. Kevin Miller, he was the central, terrifying question mark. When detectives finally tracked him down late on Sunday afternoon, they found his beat-up Ford Ranger abandoned in a grocery store parking lot several miles from his home, keys still in the ignition. Kevin himself was nowhere to be found. His parents, distraught, cooperated fully. They had no idea where he was or why his truck was abandoned. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of activity, yet strangely hollow. Police scoured the Frisco party house, interviewing every teenager who had been there, but the stories were muddled by alcohol and the chaos of the night. No one had seen Sarah or Kevin leave together. No one remembered them even talking for long. The last firm sighting was Sarah talking to Kevin inside the house. The trail, already faint, grew colder with each passing hour. The media, initially drawn to the story of the missing prom queen, soon moved on. A local news segment, a few fleeting mentions in the Dallas Morning News, and then silence. Emily and David were left in a vacuum of despair. Emily plastered flyers of Sarah's smiling face, the prom photo, radiant and full of life on every lamppost, every grocery store window from Plano to Dallas. David walked the suburban streets, knocking on doors, asking the same agonizing questions, meeting the same blank stares. The summer of 1998 was a blur of agonizing uncertainty. The heat, usually a comforting Texas constant, became oppressive, a suffocating blanket. The house, once vibrant, became a tomb of hushed whispers and unspoken fears. Matt, Sarah's younger brother, retreated into himself, his once bright eyes now shadowed with confusion and a nascent grief he couldn't articulate. He stopped asking when Sarah would come home. Weeks turned into months. The official police investigation slowed to a crawl, then stagnated. There were no leads, no ransom demands, no credible sightings. Kevin Miller also remained missing. The police theorized a runaway pair, or a murder-suicide, or perhaps Kevin had harmed Sarah and then fled, disappearing into the vast anonymity of the American landscape. But without a body, without a crime scene, without any concrete evidence, it was all speculation. The Jenkins family lived in a suspended animation of hope and horror. Every ringing phone, every strange car passing by their house sent a jolt of adrenaline through them, only to be followed by the crushing weight of disappointment. Years crawled by. The new millennium arrived. Sarah's prom dress remained untouched in her closet, a poignant relic of a life frozen in time. Chloe went off to college, then started her own family, but the shadow of Sarah's disappearance never truly lifted. Mark moved away, eventually marrying, but he carried the ghost of what-ifs with him. The Jenkins family never truly healed. Emily became a spectral figure, her once vibrant spirit dimmed, consumed by grief and a relentless, exhausting search for answers. David, stoic on the surface, aged prematurely, his shoulders permanently hunched under the weight of an unimaginable burden. Then, 8 years later, the world had changed. Flip phones were common, the internet was beginning to reshape daily life, but some things remained stubbornly, agonizingly the same. The year was 2006. It was a Tuesday in early October, the Texas fall finally bringing a slight reprieve from the summer's furnace. A land surveyor working for a new housing development project near an undeveloped rural tract of land just outside Farmersville, approximately 45 miles northeast of Dallas, made a grim discovery. Amidst a dense thicket of mesquite and scrub oak in a shallow, overgrown ditch, he noticed something unnatural, a glint of faded fabric, an unsettling shape beneath the soil. He called the Collin County Sheriff's Department. Forensic anthropologists from the University of North Texas were dispatched. What they found were scattered skeletal remains, partially exposed, suggesting they had been there for a significant period. The remains were carefully excavated. Amidst the bones, they found fragments of clothing, a small piece of pale blue silk, a sequin, a delicate silver necklace with a tiny star pendant, a gift Sarah had received for her 16th birthday from her parents. Dental records quickly confirmed the agonizing truth. The remains belonged to Sarah Jenkins. The news hit the Jenkins family like a tsunami. 8 years of agonizing uncertainty had ended, replaced by a brutal, definitive reality. There was a macabre relief in knowing, a painful closure, but it was eclipsed by a renewed, searing grief. Sarah was gone, and the questions, far from being answered, only intensified. The Dallas Police Department, in collaboration with Collin County, reopened Sarah's case. What was once a missing persons file now became a cold case homicide investigation. Detectives revisited old interviews, re-examined the few pieces of evidence that had been collected in 1998. The silk fragments, the sequin, the necklace, these were new, tangible links. Forensic analysis, though more advanced than in 1998, still faced immense challenges. The remains had been exposed to the elements for years, making any specific cause of death difficult to determine beyond the obvious conclusion of foul play. No definitive trauma was immediately apparent on the bones, no bullet holes, no clear stab wounds. The scattered nature suggested potential animal activity, or perhaps a deliberate attempt to conceal and dismember, but without more evidence, it was conjecture. The focus immediately returned to Kevin Miller. His disappearance in 1998 had always been suspicious. Was he the killer fleeing justice, or was he another victim? A nationwide bulletin was reissued for Kevin, but no trace of him had ever surfaced. He had vanished as completely as Sarah had, leaving behind only questions. The discovery brought a fresh wave of media attention, reigniting the public's memory of the prom night disappearance. True crime blogs, a nascent phenomenon in 2006, picked up the story. Renewed pleas were made for information. The Jenkins family, scarred but resilient, held a press conference, their faces etched with a grief that had only deepened with the years. Emily clutched a framed photo of Sarah's prom night smile, her voice trembling but firm, begging anyone with information to come forward. But no new, credible leads emerged. The passage of 8 years had erased memories, scattered witnesses, and allowed any potential killer ample time to cover their tracks. The rural location where Sarah's remains were found was a desolate, undeveloped area in 1998, making it an ideal dumping ground, easily accessible by quiet country roads, yet remote enough to go undiscovered for years. The investigation continued, a slow, methodical grind against the unforgiving tide of time. Detectives theorized various scenarios, an argument between Sarah and Kevin that escalated, a planned meeting gone wrong, or perhaps a third party involved who had taken advantage of their vulnerability. Without Kevin Miller or a living witness or a definitive cause of death, the case remained tantalizingly close, yet impossibly distant. The Jenkins family buried Sarah in a quiet cemetery in Plano, a small, dignified ceremony where mourners wore shades of pale blue, a nod to the dress she never got.